sponsored by Subcase. This is a battle between smartphone brains and brawn. The choice between the Galaxy S25 Ultra and Google Pixel 9 Pro XL is about much more than just the spec sheet, which is a good thing for Google because otherwise this would be a very one-sided contest. While Samsung has arguably the fastest benchmarking phone out there right now, Google's approach to hardware has always been about doing more with less, which makes this potentially lopsided contest all the more interesting. Despite both being flat metal rectangles with rounded corners, the hand feel and build of the S25 Ultra and Pixel 9 Pro XL are quite dramatically different. And although I have generally preferred the aesthetics of past Pixels, there's something about holding the S25 Ultra in your hand that just feels a bit more sophisticated. Maybe it's the sharper matte sides versus the glossy finish of the Google phone, or the slimmer screen borders, or the fact that it comes across as less of a blatant iPhone copycat when viewed from the front. That said, I'm still a fan of the Pixel's iconic camera bar here, which is more distinctive than just the collection of lens protrusions that you have here with Samsung. The Galaxy is also lighter than the Pixel, but not to the extent that you're really gonna notice. And it's also kind of a wash in terms of one-hand ability. Both are pretty hefty phones with 6.8 and 6.9 inch panels respectively, though obviously with less visible bezels and sharper corners on the Samsung side. If I had to pick one design, I'd probably choose Samsung's just for that slightly sharper in-hand feel, but I really don't feel like there's much in it. I'm also a big fan of Samsung's Corning Gorilla Armor 2 display with its unique anti-reflection finish, something that is still exclusive to Samsung's Ultra phones 2 generations in. That means that even though its peak brightness level is beaten on paper by the Pixel, in real world use you'll deal with noticeably less screen glare on the Galaxy versus the Pixel. I don't want to undersell Google's Actua display though, because it's also a fantastic looking panel, and in fact one of the areas that Google has improved the most in over the past few generations of Pixel. It's just that, only Samsung has that secret sauce for deeper blacks and less screen glare. And if you want to keep your S25 Ultra in pristine condition, protected from knocks, scrapes and dirt, you want to check out the latest cases from this video's sponsor, Subcase. Subcase provides a range of options for the S25 series to suit any lifestyle, including the Unicorn Beetle Grip for maximum rugged protection while still showing off your choice of S25 color. This case sports ultra shock absorbent TPU bumpers and is MagSafe compatible, boasting 1.81 kg force magnets. Plus this ring holder here doubles as a kickstand in portrait or landscape orientation. Or go all out with the Unicorn Beetle Mag XT. This ultra-durable case features unbendable polycarbonate and a zinc alloy camera cover that can also double as a kickstand. The camera window has been tested over 30,000 times. Better still, you get MagSafe charger support without any disruption to the S Pen thanks to the built-in iron plate. That's not the case with most magnetic chargers for Samsung Ultra phones. The UB Grip and UB Mag XT are exclusive to the S25 Ultra, giving you the protection you need to keep your new device safe and looking fantastic. So check out these and other great cases from Subcase at the link in the description below. Thanks to Subcase for sponsoring. Now back to the video. Let's take a mini tangent through benchmarking numbers, even though we already know for the most part how things are going to work out here. And yeah, whether you're talking Geekbench CPU, GPU, or endurance tests in 3D Mark, there's only one winner here, and it sure ain't Google. The S25 Ultra's unique higher clocked version of the Snapdragon 8 Elite absolutely creams the Pixel 9 Pro XL, whose Tensor G4 offers performance more in line with high-end Snapdragons of 2 or 3 years ago. You can see the exact numbers here, but there's still very little nuance to this comparison. Samsung is the winner by a country mile. What is worth remembering though is that the Pixel never felt slow to me at all during day-to-day use, nor did it produce anywhere near the level of heat that earlier Pixels have over the years. If all you're doing is typical smartphone stuff like browsing, streaming, multitasking, you probably won't notice much difference at all in day-to-day app performance between these two phones. And the Pixel actually has one slight spec lead on Samsung that is worth remembering in the form of its 16GB of RAM, although part of that is permanently reserved for Gemini and the phone's other AI trickery. Whether the S25's 12GB limit, at least in the West, becomes an issue further down the line, we'll have to wait and see. Both devices also sport around 5,000 mAh battery capacities, which is a pretty unremarkable number in the grand scheme of things, and having used both phones on and off, the Pixel over several months and the Galaxy more recently, I noticed what I'd say is a small lead for Samsung in terms of battery life. That's likely attributable to its newer and more efficient CPU, as well as some lower level optimizations Samsung says it's done to help individual components cut down on power draw. Once again though, I really don't want to undersell what is still pretty great battery life from the Pixel, especially compared to Pixels 7 and 8. My real-world experience of the Pixel 9 Pro XL has been of a phone that can always reliably get me to the end of the day and often beyond that, even when using its loadout of fancy camera and AI features. Charging-wise though, neither phone is particularly remarkable, with 45 watts over a wire for both, and both managed to reach past the 70% mark in half an hour, with the Pixel taking slightly longer to reach full capacity versus the Galaxy. Wireless charging speeds are also slightly quicker on the Pixel side, 23 watts with the second-gen Pixel stand, as opposed to 15 with the S25 Ultra. And that's accompanied on both sides by battery-saving software features that can limit the max charge level to increase the cell's lifespan over time, which is great. I do also want to call out Samsung's light performance profile mode once again though. Basically just slightly limits the clock speed of the prime cores and the GPU to eke a little bit more battery life out of this phone with a barely noticeable hit to its performance. I'd really like to see something like this in more phones. Samsung software has just gotten its biggest look and feel upgrade in years in the form of One UI 7. Meanwhile, the Pixel UI is pretty much a known quantity at this point. It looks pretty much the same as it has since the days of the Pixel 6 and Android 12. And we've got individual videos on both One UI 7 and the latest Android 15 update for more on what's new in these latest software revisions. So instead in this section, I want to focus on the unique capabilities of these two software experiences. And one obvious place to start is with the S Pen of the S25 Ultra. It's no longer Bluetooth enabled sadly, meaning it does less than previous Ultras, no more wireless gestures or camera remote capabilities, but it's still a nice to have extra that works well with many of the drawing based AI features of this phone. AI Select, for instance, lets you grab pictures in any app and immediately import them into this generative AI tool. And there are similar generative features built into the stock Samsung Gallery app now. The equivalent features on the Google side are a little bit more reserved, as Google has perhaps erred on the side of caution when it comes to the visual side of AI, perhaps understandably after some early embarrassments. My favorite AI features on both phones have to do with photography. Instant slow-mo still amazes me, with the S25 Ultra being able to infer extra frames in video footage, even clips not recorded on the phone. The Pixel's Zoom Enhance is another super impressive capability that can conjure up extra details that might be missing from the original capture when you zoom in. And while Google still has an excellent loadout of generative editing features like Magic Editor, Magic Eraser, and Reimagine, I've been really impressed with the new additions to Samsung's AI editing features in the built-in Gallery app. Object Erasure in particular has come on in leaps and bounds since its introduction a year ago. One feature I do miss from the Pixel though is the ability to add myself into group shots later using Add Me. This is the kind of thing that makes me excited to see what future Pixel feature drops can bring to this phone over the next 7 years. Elsewhere, DeX, Samsung's desktop mode, does a great job of expanding this phone's capabilities out to basically mini PC replacement territory that's great for anything web browser or productivity related, assuming you've also packed a Bluetooth mouse and keyboard. Google has been working on a similar desktop mode for years, and now you're actually able to try it on the Pixel 9 by enabling a developer settings flag. Works surprisingly well, but probably should still be considered a preview feature for now. Also, windowed multitasking really isn't supported in vanilla Android for phones or the Pixel UI more broadly. That's something you still only get on the Pixel tablets, as well as in One UI and other more custom flavors of Android. Samsung's powerful Modes and Routines feature helps you automate a whole bunch of stuff. For example, turning off fast charging overnight, or enabling Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or Do Not Disturb mode in a certain location. Over on the Pixel side, there's a similar feature called Rules that allows for basic if-then kind of scripting, but it doesn't quite compare to what Samsung can offer. Similar deal with customization. Now, Google's Material You does allow for a fairly customized feel thanks to its wallpaper color theming and the various clock styles and other changes that you can make. But Samsung's takes things to the next level, and a big part of that is a downloadable extra called Good Lock. Basically, if you can imagine doing it on your phone, Good Lock will have an option or a setting for it. Everything from seeing more detailed Wi-Fi information to completely overhauling your home screen with totally freeform icons and widgets. Software support is another factor you want to consider. Both are set for 7 years of platform updates, likely taking them up to Android 22 in 2031 or 32. With the Google phone though, you're likely going to be seeing those updates in a more timely manner, as older Samsung phones tend to be deprioritized in favor of newer models as the generations pass. On paper, both of these two camera setups are pretty closely matched. Looking at the three main cameras, primary, ultra-wide, and super telephoto, the sensor sizes are all in kind of the same ballpark, though with the resolution advantage for Samsung, especially with that 200 megapixel primary. Samsung also has that tiny 3x telephoto, which is a total passenger in this whole equation, contributing very little to the overall experience. That being the case, most of the differences you might expect to see between these two camera systems should come down to the Galaxy and Pixel's image processing. Samsung of course has the benefit of its special Snapdragon 8 Elite, and Google has its AI-powered image pipeline. And all of these differences are only going to become more interesting once we bring video into the equation, so let's get into it. To start with, we have some telltale color differences visible across the board. Not as stark as with the iPhone 16 Pro Max versus S25 Ultra, but visible nonetheless. Once again, Samsung's colors tend to be on the cooler side in daylight conditions. This mostly comes down to personal preference, but I think I prefer the warmer look of the Pixel. And looking at the output of these primary cameras in the default 12 megapixel mode, there's barely anything in it in terms of the amount of detail captured and dynamic range more generally. I feel like Samsung adds an ever so slight bit of extra sharpness to its shots in some instances, as well as sometimes being slightly underexposed compared to Google, but this is an incredibly tiny nitpicky difference. The ultra-wides make for a bit more of an interesting comparison. That's because in addition to these telltale color differences, you actually have an ever so slightly wider viewport with the Pixel's ultra-wide compared to the S25 Ultra. The difference isn't huge, but it is definitely there. I had to go back and check the spec sheet to see if I wasn't going crazy, and sure enough, you do get a whole 3 degrees more in your field of view with the Pixel. That's not a huge deal, but worth noting. If you squint in a few places, you may see a tiny bit more detail in some of the Pixel's ultra-wide shots, but again, we're talking about tiny details here. The other ultra-wide where there actually is quite a big difference between these two can be found around the front. Wide selfies remain a unique strength for Google, as you can see here. Samsung's front facer doesn't give you as much space for extra friends or scenery. The very similar spec of these phones' telephoto cameras also results in some really close run comparison shots, as you can see here, where the color differences and perhaps a bit of exposure is the only real tell that you're using one or the other. Once again, I'm siding with Google's color science, but Samsung still produces fine looking telephoto pics with a ton of detail. Other details are fairly minuscule, a slightly sharper look in some of the Samsung shots, but with a bit more original details being preserved in the Pixel pictures like the brickwork here. Digging into night photography, there's pretty much nothing in it if you're looking at shots taken with the main camera. The color differences are less pronounced, but still kind of there if you go looking for them, ever so slightly cooler on the Samsung camera. With the ultra-wide, Samsung clearly has come a long way from the days of the S23 and S24 Ultra, and ultra-wide pictures in night mode are in the same ballpark as Google in terms of quality. But Google still seems to be a bit more aggressive with its computational photography, resulting in pictures with less of a vignette effect around the edges, and more shadow detail around the edges generally as well. Not much in it, but I still think I prefer the look of the Pixel shot here. And in low light telephoto shots, both benefit from excellent night modes and large image sensors, providing some great shots at 5x and above. Google seemed a little more trigger happy than Samsung to me when it came to activating that night mode feature. As you can see in this example, Samsung remained in full auto here versus the clearer night mode shot of the Pixel. And if you wanted an example of why that 3x camera on the S25 Ultra either needs to be upgraded or retired, then just look at this comparison at 3x versus a digitally zoomed 3x capture from the Pixel's main camera. Yikes. Over in video, the biggest differences I noticed involved weaker performance than I would expect to see from the Pixel's ultra-wide, with more detail being scrubbed away than in similar footage taken with the Galaxy. Telephoto video was a closer match, but I still found myself preferring the look of Samsung's video at 5x and above. The Galaxy camera did a better job of preserving color and fine detail than the Pixel, even with its more aggressive processing. Elsewhere, it's mainly a question of feature differences as opposed to quality. As we saw with our still comparisons, there's not a whole lot in it if you compare the standard 4K 30 clips side by side with the S25 Ultra and Pixel 9 Pro, especially if you're using the primary camera. On the Samsung side, you get the new Galaxy Log feature, of course, allowing you to capture greater dynamic range in a special format that can be graded later in a professional app like Adobe Premiere Pro. Likewise, Samsung's new video nightography results in a real visible improvement to nighttime footage taken with this phone, with results you can see even in notoriously tricky walking nighttime shots. And Samsung has the bonus of full 8K captures as well if you're into that kind of thing. Which brings us to the Pixel's crown jewel AI feature, Video Boost. This can be inconvenient to use because it involves offloading footage to the cloud for processing, but it's also incredibly impressive and can be used to smooth out judders in handheld footage, upscale to 8K from 4K original clips, or use Google's night sight mode in video. And the results are pretty spectacular, as you can see here. Without night sight video, Google clearly falls behind Samsung in moving nighttime scenes, but with it enabled, I think this is the best night video available on any smartphone. Just take a look. So if I was looking at a phone out of this pair to use for the next 2 or 3 years, it is a tough call, especially given the price difference, but I would go for the Galaxy S25 Ultra, even considering its higher asking price. The sharper design, lighter weight, and deep black reflection cancelling display demonstrates Samsung's hardware lead. While both phones will be supported for the next 7 generations of Android, the Galaxy's quicker CPU gives me more confidence that it'll be able to perform better going into the late 20s and early 30s. The software is faster and more responsive than it's ever been, especially with fresh attention being given to the animation system in One UI 7. And the extra functionality you get from robust multitasking and DeX, including wireless DeX, make it a better device of productivity. And as cool as Google's AI tricks are, especially around photography, Samsung has a loadout of similar and similarly impressive generative capabilities. Plus, those cameras. While Samsung gets a lot of flack for skimping on camera hardware upgrades, its overall image quality mostly keeps pace with Google thanks to their similar optics and some processing improvements this generation. Which is why for me, as much as I do think the Pixel 9 Pro XL is Google's best phone ever and still one of the best you can buy right now, if you asked me to choose a phone out of this pair to use, I would pick Samsung's imperfect, yet excellent S25 Ultra. But that's just me. Let me know in the comments which you'd pick out of this pair. Stick around and subscribe for more comparisons coming very soon. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.